Scrum is often succinctly defined by describing its roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. The Scrum ceremonies are meetings that occur at set times during each sprint, each with its own purpose. And the Scrum artifacts are objects created during the Scrum project. The ceremonies give the project structure, and the artifacts provide transparency into the project's progress. The four Scrum artifacts are the product backlog, the sprint backlog, the Burndown Chart, and the product increment. The product backlog is the record of all the work that is yet to be completed in the project. In the beginning, it is created with the customer's requirements in the form of user stories. But as the project progresses, it will also include defects, technical architecture tasks, refactoring to reduce technical debt, and spikes to investigate areas of uncertainty. The product backlog is owned by the product owner, who is responsible for updating it with new requirements and ensuring it is prioritized with the highest priority items at the top. The product backlog items are ordered in a single queue. There can never be more than one highest priority item at any time. Typically, the user stories are quite large when they are added to the product backlog, capturing a broad feature like allowing a customer to buy products from a website. This type of user story is too large to estimate without breaking it down into several smaller, more manageable stories. This is done by the product owner and the team during the product grooming meeting. Only the highest priority user stories are reviewed during the meeting, so the items at the top of the product backlog tend to be smaller, well-understood user stories, while the lower priority items at the bottom that have not yet been groomed tend to be very large and not well understood. The highest priority items on the product backlog are given a relative estimate of effort by the team. This is often in the form of a number called story points, which represents the effort needed to implement the user story. The sprint backlog contains the items from the product backlog that will be worked in the next sprint. During the sprint planning meeting, the team uses the user story's priority and the story point estimates to select a number of items to move from the product backlog to the sprint backlog, thus removing them from the product backlog. The team and the Scrum Master must ensure the cumulative number of story points in the sprint backlog is consistent with the velocity of the team, or the amount of work that they have historically completed in the sprint. The team commits to completing the items in the sprint backlog during the next sprint, and the sprint backlog is then frozen. No more items can be added. The user stories in the sprint backlog are then broken into small tasks, normally taking from 4 to 12 hours to complete. These tasks are recorded in the sprint backlog and tracked daily to show the progress of the sprint. Sometimes the team may add, delete, or modify tasks in the sprint backlog as the team works through the sprint and gains a deeper understanding of what is needed to complete a user story. However, no new functionality can be added while the sprint is in progress. As the sprint progresses, the user stories are moved from defined to in progress to completed and then verified or accepted. When all the tasks of a user story are complete and the acceptance criteria is met, the user story is done and can be included as work done in the sprint review meeting. The story points from done stories are included in the team's velocity for the sprint. The Burndown Chart is a graph posted in a public location, visible to all, and is used to show the progress of the current sprint. The Burndown Chart shows time on the horizontal axis and work still to be completed on the vertical axis. An ideal effort guideline is drawn from the top left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner, showing what the Burndown Chart would look like if equal work was completed each day and all work was completed by the end of the sprint. Each day, the Scrum Master or the team updates the chart with the team's current progress. The team's progress rarely matches the ideal guideline, but should show a steady burn down of the work still to be completed. If the Burndown chart shows the same amount of work needs to be completed over several days, it typically means that the team is blocked and cannot advance. The product increment is the software the team has been working on during the sprint. The product increment is potentially shippable working code, which has been tested and includes documentation. Any items in the sprint backlog that were completed during the sprint can be demonstrated as a done feature during the sprint review meeting. However, a feature that is working in the code but does not meet the definition of done, agreed upon by the product owner and the team, is not accepted by the product owner into the sprint review. The feature is not demonstrated to the customer in the product increment, even though the code is complete. Even though each sprint produces a potentially shippable product increment, it is not a product unless the product owner decides it's ready to release. Each sprint will build on the current product increment, adding new features. In this way, the product increment will grow and become more fully featured with each sprint, always containing the customer's highest priority features.